Hi, I'm Bettina Ambach, the director of the Wayamo Foundation, and I'm here in Kampala, Uganda, where we just organized a series of events together with the network of Sudanese documenters with whom we have been working for the last 2.5 years now. Mm-hmm. We organized, let's say the main activity was the training, mentoring sessions together with our members from the network in getting more into what is documentation of human rights violations for the purpose of criminal accountability. Mm-hmm. One of the members of our network is Asala Salaheldin, who is with me today. And I would like to start with asking you, can you give us a brief introduction?
I work as a justice and equality researcher in Adeela, and I'm the research lead in Matmoora project. I'm a human rights defender and a law student.
Could you elaborate a little bit on your organization, Adeela, Matmoora? What's your main goal? What are your activities? And what are you doing best?
Yeah, sure. Adeela is a youth-led organization that works on 4 major mandates, which is justice, democratic transition, humanitarian aid, and peace building. Matmoora specifically is the main project focusing on justice in Adeela. It's a transitional justice project, and it's a feminist useless project as well. It's a storytelling archive that aims to humanize the Sudanese people experience with political violence in Sudan. It was established in 2021. Ever since, Matmoora worked on different individual cases and collective cases of violations, and specifically political violence, human rights violations in Sudan, through which we were able to identify multiple events that happened in Sudan, and we documented them for purposes of advocacy and recently for purposes of criminal accountability as well. That's why through including criminal accountability as a strategic pillar in the project, after a training that we had from Wayamo, thankfully, we were able to integrate criminal accountability as, or let's say start integrating criminal accountability as an essential objective that the project works for. We approach our work through doing research to have evidences and reports that's aimed for advocacy and recently for criminal accountability as well, which is through collecting evidences, and at the same time producing content and doing multiple events for memorialization and educating people and raising awareness about the violations that's happening in Sudan in order to fill the gap in the collective memory and switch the political narratives into being more humanized and centered in the victims and the people that face violations in Sudan.
Proximity to local communities. I think that's a point which is always very important in our work. So how do you engage with local communities?
One of our main objectives in the project is to actually raise the capacity of grassroots initiatives when it comes to documentation specifically. We usually have these grassroots initiatives as our partners in an equal way that includes their right to whatever products that come out as the same right that we have to them. As I said, Adeela is a youth-led organization, and actually the project's theory of change is that if young people were acquired enough or were given enough technical tools and different things that they need to document human rights violations, this would ensure that we will solve the problem of persistent impunity, systematic violations, and undocumented violations in Sudan as well.
Why is documentation work important?
If we don't know what's happening or what happened, we can never achieve any sort of justice in the future. And here comes the importance of like memorialization or the collective memory as an essential pillar in transitional justice, because we don't know the different violations and we never went through actual transitional justice process to ensure that these things and these violations and these conflicts are never going to happen again. Documentation is a pillar in transitional justice that ensures other pillars are being served. Memorialization can be done without knowing what happened. Criminal accountability or criminal justice can be served without knowing what actually happened and documenting and collecting evidences.
And I would also like to hear your opinion. What are some differences between doing documentation work for advocacy or for legal criminal accountability too?
There are some strict rules to follow, and I would like to emphasize on the very specific 5 important things when it comes to doing screening for documentation for legal accountability. For example, the very first thing is the ethical considerations that you should do when you are conducting an interview, for example. It's very important to let the person that you're talking to know that who you are, which is basically the informed consent. This person, he or she has to know whether you are, who you are, what is the reason of you taking or doing this interview or taking these informations from them. What are you going to do with them? Who's going to have the access for it? What is your organization or what body do you represent in this specific interview? This is the things that the person being interviewed has to know as a term of informed consent. The other things would be like ensuring not to re-traumatize these people, because most of the time we're trying to talk to people who went through violations. So trauma is always there, no matter how much time passed. Another thing that is important when you're doing documentation for legal purposes is the contact information of the person. Because as we said, we're trying to collect these evidences to be one day brought before a court of law for purposes of criminal accountability. Whether this law is universal or it's domestic or whatever, you have to have this person's contact for them to later be accessible for whatever legal proceedings that might take place in the future. Another thing is also the incident description, which is knowing what exactly happened. And here comes like the 5 WH questions that are very important, which is what happened, who did it, who is the victim, where did it happen, how did it happen, and when did it happen. We already asked about the perpetrator in the question of who did it, but we have to know more details about this, because the criminal accountability is going to be for this person who's accused of doing that thing. So questions like what was this person wearing, what was this person, how was this person speaking, what language, did they ever say that they're affiliated to specific forces on the ground, what did they say while the crime was being committed. From this we can actually get to know other things like the intention. The 5th thing is the basis of knowledge, which is the thing that we were very grateful for Wayamo's training, because we got to figure out more about this through the training. The basis of knowledge is basically knowing how does the person you're interviewing knows about anything that they told you about. If this person saw that, so this brings this person to be a very key witness in that specific violation he's talking about. So yeah, basically the basis of knowledge is a very important thing that you need to know about when you're documenting for criminal accountability.
I would like to finish our conversation a bit on a personal note, and like to know why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you for this question. As a Sudanese woman who was born and raised in Sudan, my journey with injustice was happened like in a very early age of mine. Starting from injustice against women in Sudan, gender-based violence, whatever, and that's actually how I started my career in the feminist movement in Sudan. But why am I documenting international crimes right now specifically? I would say that's because I lost my brother in the war, and that's because I'm aware of the effect of injustice on people. So the reason why I'm doing this is because if we ever became able of breaking the cycle of impunity, I would at least ensure that other families won't go through this. And this would give enough meaning for my life. So that's why I'm doing this on personal level. Thank you so much.